Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg, and it is October, which means it's spooky season. So I thought it would be fun to go through this list that Time Magazine just put out about the 100 best mysteries and thrillers of all time. I have the list pulled up on my laptop. We'll sort of go through quickly. I'll only really talk about some of the books. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the books that I'm not really familiar with. But I just thought it would be fun to pick through, sort of like when the New York Times does its 100 notable books of the year. I don't want to talk about every book, but we'll talk about some of them. I will have a link to the full article in the description box down below if you would like to check that out for yourself and go through. I'd love to also hear which of these books you have read, which books are a little surprising for you, because there are some books where I really think they stretch the boundaries of what a mystery or a thriller are. But again, because this is spooky season, I thought this just felt like a fun thing to do right now. So let's start taking a look at the list. Okay, so we start at the top. We have the 100 best mystery and thriller books of all time. This is done with a panel of celebrated authors. Let's get going into this list. So first we have The Women in White by Wilkie Collins. I did read this book. I actually listened to it on audio, and I remember thinking it was just fine. I didn't particularly love it, but I didn't dislike it either. I definitely thought it was too long. It was a very long book, but not surprised it's here. It is probably one of the original mystery or thriller books for sure, and for that reason, it probably has to be included on any list, but I remember only thinking it was so-so. Then we have Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I've never read Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's kind of a problem. I feel like I should at some point. I might start with The Brothers Karamazov if I do, but Crime and Punishment is definitely on my list, something I want to get to. I'm not really familiar with The Leavenworth Case by Anna Catherine Green, so we're going to blow right past that. I took a class about Henry James in college and learned that I don't particularly like Henry James. I didn't really get along with most of the writing in that class. And Turn of the Screw was one of the more interesting things that we read that year. But again, kind of similar to The Woman in White, I remember thinking it was good, but it hasn't stuck with me over time. And it is what it is. Then there's The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. I've never read an Arthur Conan Doyle. I've never read a Sherlock Holmes book as a result. So it is something that's on my list of things to get to, especially since Joel and I will be going to Ireland and Scotland next year, and I want to read Irish and Scottish authors before we go, and Arthur Conan Doyle would sort of fit that brief. So I might get to it, hopefully sometime soon, but we'll see. Then there is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. Now, I haven't read that one, but I have read a lot of Agatha Christie. Now, I believe this is a Hercule Poirot book, but it's not one of the ones that I have read. And I haven't read too many of the Hercule Poirot books because I'm much more of a Marple fan, or just of the standalone books. Hercule Poirot is fine, but I don't get along with him all that well, so I haven't read a whole bunch of them. I've sort of hit the big ones, including The Murder on the Orient Express. So it is what it is. I could potentially read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd at some point, because I do like Agatha Christie books, and I would probably be convinced to work my way through some of the ones that I haven't read, but I have not read it at this point. Moving along, we have The Crime at Black Dudley by Marjorie Allingham. Not familiar with that one, so let's just keep going. The Patient in Room 18 by Mignon G. Eberhardt. I am also unfamiliar with that one. The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. I have read that one. I believe I actually read it in high school because I took weird high school classes. The school that I went to tried to structure English classes like college courses. So for one half of the year, you would take one thing and then you'd sign up for a different one. So it was supposed to model college semesters, and the topics were much more varied than what you would find at most high schools in the United States. So I took a class called like The Comic Spirit and things like that. I took a Shakespeare class. One of the classes I took was called Literature of Our Place, and I went to high school in San Francisco. So it was all about California literature. That's how I read Joan Didion for the first time. And we were assigned a project toward the end And The Maltese Falcon was one of the books on the list, and I read it for that. So I have read The Maltese Falcon. I remember being a little disappointed, but at the time I was into much more current mystery books. So I think when I was thinking of it as a mystery, I have never been successful at noir, though. So it's very likely that I wouldn't get along with it, even if I read it now. But yeah, I have read it, and I thought it was fine. That seems to be a trend on this list so far. Okay, moving along, we have The Conjure Man Dies by Rudolph Fisher. I have not read that. A Man Lay Dead by Neil Marsh. I did read that toward the end of last year, 2022, because obviously I like Agatha Christie. I don't really like the state of the mystery genre as it is now. I tend to prefer more old-fashioned mysteries, and that's why I like Agatha Christie. So my neighbor recommended Neil Marsh, and I read the first 3 or 4 books in the series, and they were sort of a wild ride. A Man Lay Dead, I had issues with, but I was willing to keep going, and I would probably continue the series, but I definitely needed a break. A Man Lay Dead, it takes a wild detour in the middle. I like the detective, Roderick Allen. I thought that the journalist character, Nigel Bathgate, was only going to be like a one-off, like he wasn't going to come back, but he comes back a lot in the subsequent books, and I didn't quite like that. So I have read Man Lay Dead. I thought it was fine. Again, that seems to be a trend with the books on this list that I have read so far, at least. Then we have Gaudy Night, a novel not without detection by Dorothy L. Sayers. I've never read a Dorothy L. Sayers book, but I really need to, especially since I do tend to like those classic whodunit style mysteries. And people have told me that because I have liked Agatha Christie, I should try Dorothy L. Sayers. So I think I would get along well with her work. I just need to do it at some point. Moving along, we have The Three Coffins by John Dixon Carr. Haven't read it, so let's keep going. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I actually have a copy of this book, and I haven't gotten around to reading it yet, but I've heard fantastic things. I actually just talked about it in a book haul revisit for the month of October. It's just coincidental all around. So I've heard a lot of really great things about this book, and I would like to read it. I am a fan of the Hitchcock movie. I just haven't read the book, and I would really like to do it at some point. It's kind of surprising I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I will. Then we have A Coffin for Demetrios by Eric Ambler. Haven't read it, don't really know anything about it. And again, I'm not going to spend time in this video opening the tab to find out what this book is about and see if it's something that I'd be interested in. So if you've read any of the ones that I haven't, let me know if it's something that you would recommend in the comment section down below. Let's move right along. We have Double Indemnity by James M. Cain. I am pretty sure I have not read this one. I read Mildred Pierce, which is by James M. Cain, I believe. I don't think I read Double Indemnity. Then you have If He Hollers, Let Him Go by Chester B. Himes. Have not read it. I've heard good things about Chester Himes, if I remember correctly, but have not read it. In a Lonely Place by Dorothy B. Hughes. I have not read that one. The Daughter of Time by Josephine Tay. I have not. I've heard of Josephine Tay, but I have not read the book. Beat Not the Bones by Charlotte J. I am unfamiliar with that one. I have read Casino Royale by Ian Fleming. I read all of Ian Fleming's James Bond books, and let me tell you, that was ultimately a waste of time. They are extremely dated, like really badly dated. Even at the time, I don't think they would have been great, but they certainly haven't aged well. And very problematic and bad, especially as you start working your way through the series. But yeah, Casino Royale is probably one of the less objectionable ones. It is the first in the series of books. Obviously, it was not the first movie. The first movie was Dr. No, and then they looped back later and did Casino Royale when they were introducing Daniel Craig as a new James Bond. But yeah, I understand why it's here. I don't think those books have aged well at all. Those books aged like a rancid something, so it's not good. I wouldn't put them on a list, but that's me. Then we have A Kiss Before Dying by Ira Levin. I've also read this one. I went through a stretch where I was really enjoying Ira Levin's work. Ira Levin wrote Rosemary's Baby, The Stepford Wives, A Kiss Before Dying, The Boys from Brazil, and I have read those. I don't think I went any further than those, but, honestly, I would put Rosemary's Baby or The Stepford Wives on this list. They lean a little horror. Maybe that's why they went with A Kiss Before Dying, because A Kiss Before Dying is more of a thriller. It's about a man who basically he's plotting a murder. So it probably fits mystery thriller vibe more than Rosemary's Baby or The Stepford Wives. However, I think Rosemary's Baby and The Stepford Wives are vastly superior. A Kiss Before Dying was good. I'm not surprised to see Ira Levin on this list. I just think if you're only going to choose one of his books, it probably should be Rosemary's Baby or The Stepford Wives. It is what it is. Then we have The Long Goodbye by Raymond Chandler. I have not read that. Beast in View by Margaret Miller. I have not read that. The Quiet American by Graham Greene. I'm pretty sure I did read this for a class in college. It was after I had transferred to Columbia University. And unfortunately, it was one of the first 2 semesters that I was there, and I was so stressed by the workload and everything that I don't remember a lot of what I read at all. I think in the same class, I read Austerlitz by Sebald, and I have almost no memory of it at all. So pretty much all of the books that I read in those 2 semesters, I would need to reread because I just don't remember them at all. And I'm almost positive The Quiet American was something that was on that list. Oops. The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. I read it in, what year did the movie come out? Was that 1999? I was still in high school, but I read the book. I remember liking the movie better than the book. I would have to revisit both to be sure, because, it's been a long time since I either saw the movie or read the book. But if I remember correctly, this is an instance where the movie is actually better than the book, in my opinion. Because in the book, Ripley pretty well fools everybody. He's never really in danger of being found out. So it feels like there are no stakes and there isn't a whole lot of suspense. And that is kind of the point, because Patricia Highsmith is looking at him as this sociopath who's able to fool people. Like, that's kind of the point, that he's able to fool people and deceive people and flatter them and get away with a lot of things. But it doesn't feel like a book with a lot of stakes to me. The movie has much closer calls and near misses, and that makes it feel a lot more exciting. At least that's my memory of it. So if you have read or seen the movie recently and disagree, let me know in the comment section down below. But that's what I remember about it. I have not read Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith, and that is another one that I really want to read. And I feel like that would also fit the vibe for this list. The only other Patricia Highsmith book that I have read is The Price of Salt, which is what is now known as Carol, and it, of course, was adapted into the movie Carol. It's not a thriller at all, but it is a good book, and I just wanted to mention it for that. Then we have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I have read this recently, maybe 2-3 years ago. I listened to it on audio around this time of year because, again, spooky season, and it just sort of fit the vibe and what I was listening to. So I remember liking it a lot. I think the unfortunate thing about We Have Always Lived in the Castle is that a lot of books since it was published have sort of copied it a little too much, to the point where I found it a little predictable. And I think if you read it at the time that it was published, it would have been extremely surprising and suspenseful. However, you always have to respect the thing that does that. For instance, the Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert movie, It Happened One Night, establishes all of the romantic comedy tropes that were repeated over the next 100 years. So it feels familiar and predictable if you watch it now. But then you have to remember, this is something that invented all of those tropes that you're so familiar with. And that is, I think, We Have Always Lived in the Castle absolutely deserves a spot on this list, I would say. I have only read The Haunting of Hill House otherwise in Shirley Jackson's canon of literature, but I need to read The Lottery. I know it's like a gaping hole in my reading. I will get around to it at some point, but I haven't at this point. Now we have The Spy Who Came In From the Cold by John le Carre. I have never read a John le Carre book. Is it John le Carre or John le Carre? I don't actually know. Point being, I have never read one of his books, and I feel like I should, but I have seen the movie Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and it felt really convoluted. So I've been a little hesitant to dive into his books because I was worried that they would be the same. So if you've read any of his books, let me know what you think of them in the comments down below. The Hanjin Murders by Seishi Yokomizo. I have not read it, and I'm not familiar with it. Same with Where Are the Children by Mary Higgins Clark. I absolutely know Mary Higgins Clark. I just don't know that one. I've never read one of her books. Maybe I should. There are a lot of them. And I think she writes or wrote classic sort of whodunit books. So maybe that would be something I would enjoy. If you've read any of her books, let me know in the comment section down below. Maybe Where Are the Children would be a good place to start as well. Then we have The Shining by Stephen King. I read it in high school and was terrified of it. And then I read it after I started my BookTube channel to do a reread of it. And it wasn't as scary as I remembered. I did a video comparing the book and the movie. I'll link it down below because that was sort of really interesting to do. The movie is very different from the book. But yeah, I didn't like it as much as I did in high school. Sometimes that happens. And then we have James Crumley's The Last Good Kiss. I think I just read an article that had the name James Crumley, but I haven't read any of his books for sure. Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. I have not read that book, and I should at some point get around to doing it. I don't know when, but I should at some point. The Hunt for Red October by Tom Clancy. So I had a copy of Patriot Games when I was in junior high and early on in high school, and I attempted to read it multiple times. It probably didn't work mostly because of my age and because his books are a lot more detail-oriented than someone who's in like junior high would be looking for. But the experience always made me think his books are just kind of not for me. And that's fine. They can be out there. He probably deserves a spot on this list, but I don't think I'm going to seek any of them out and read them for myself, being honest. Then we have A Dark Adapted Eye by Barbara Vine. I have not read any of her books, but I've heard good things about them. I don't know anything about The Decagon House Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji. I have read The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. I read that book when I was very young, and all I will say about the experience is that I read a sentence out loud because I didn't understand what was in it, and I got into trouble because my mother thought I was just saying it. So yeah, when you're in 5th or 6th grade, you probably shouldn't be reading The Silence of the Lambs. I did. I had not seen the movie at that point, but yeah. I remember this. Red Dragon is good. The Silence of the Lambs is good. I would stop there. Don't go any further with Thomas Harris. Then we have Devil in a Blue Dress by Walter Mosley. I have read a book by Walter Mosley. I read one of the later books in the Easy Rollins series, and I did not like it. But I keep hearing good things about Devil in a Blue Dress, which I think was the first Easy Rollins book. I could be wrong about that. But I should go back and try that one at some point. It's just that I didn't like the one that was later on in the series, so that's put an extra hurdle toward me getting toward that one. I don't know anything about Mean Spirit by Linda Hogan, so if you know anything about it, let me know down below. I don't know anything about Postmortem by Patricia Daniels Cornwell or... Hi, Editing Greg is here. Don't mind the bedhead. I was just looking at this and realized, of course I know who Patricia Cornwell is. I think the Daniels really threw me. So I have not read any of Patricia Cornwell's books, and I have really thought about it. I just haven't done it. So yeah, I think the Daniels really just threw me off because of course I know who Patricia Cornwell is. I just haven't read one of her books. Anyway, back to the rest of the video. I know Henning Mankell. I have not read any of their books. I don't know what Faceless Killers is about at all, though. I don't really know much about their work, other than it is consistently recommended. Don't know anything about Dead Time by Eleanor Taylor Bland either. I actually have a copy of The Secret History by Donna Tartt. The problem is I really didn't like The Goldfinch and I didn't finish it. So I know a lot of people like The Secret History and I should get around to it. I just have a little bit of resistance because I didn't like The Goldfinch. And at some point I will get over it and I will read it or listen to the audio. I have a copy on my shelf. But yeah, it's just that extra hurdle of getting over the one that I didn't like by her. And I know that's silly. A lot of people like The Secret History. I'll get to it at some point. I just wanted a little time and space. And because I'm going to need to reread The Goldfinch for my Pulitzer Prize project, that's all the Donna Tartt I can handle for right now. Then we have Smilla's Sense of Snow by Peter Hoag. I also have a copy of that on my shelf, but I haven't gotten around to reading it. I've heard a lot of really good things, and I would like to get to it at some point. I don't know anything about When Death Comes Stealing by Valerie Wilson Wesley. I have read a Harlan Coben book, but not that one, and I thought the one that I read was just fine. I don't remember the name of it. It was turned into a movie with Bruce Willis, but I didn't see it. That probably lets you know which book it was if you know Harlan Coben, but I thought it was just fine. I know Harlan Coben is a very popular author, or at least has been in recent years, but I haven't followed any other books of his. I've heard a lot of really great things about Lee Child as well, but I haven't read any of his books. And I don't know anything about Lady Joker by Kaoru Takamura. I don't know anything about Morituri by Yasmina Kadra. I have a copy of Out by Natsuo Korino. I've heard some very negative things about it from some people. I think Came at the Middle of the Book March was one of them. I do still want to read it because it keeps popping up on lists like this. So I feel like at some point I will try it for myself, but we'll just have to wait and see when that actually happens. Then there's Inner City Blues by Paula L. Woods. I don't know anything about that one. I've heard about Val McDermid, but I have not read any of the books, including A Place of Execution. Don't know anything about Those Bones Are Not My Child by Toni Cade Bambara, or Blanche Passes Go by Barbara Neely. Don't know anything about Death of a Red Heroine by Kieu Xiaolong. I have heard of Joe Nesbo. Oh, no, I have read one of his books. I was going to say I haven't read any. I read the one that was... I didn't finish it. The one that was a modernized version of Macbeth, something like that. I didn't like it. I should try another one, but yeah, that one didn't quite work for me. Mystic River by Dennis Lehane. I have read that. I remember really liking it when I read it, and I think subsequent books that I read by Dennis Lehane didn't match it at all. Like, I really didn't like Shutter Island. I really didn't like that historical fiction book that he did, and to the point where it kind of killed my momentum working through his books. I had been planning to do the series that he had been writing. Gone Baby Gone was one of them. But the fact that I really didn't like the other books of his that I read really just kind of made me stop. And I haven't gone any further. But I do remember liking Mystic River, and I have seen the movie, but I remember liking the book a fair amount. Shadow of the Wind. I know a lot of people are going to be upset about this, but I have not read it. Maybe I'll get to it someday. The Surgeon by Tess Gerritsen. I have read it. I've read all of... No, that's not true. I haven't read all of them because there was a new Rizzoli and Isles book that was published last year, and I haven't read that one yet. But otherwise, I have read all of the Rizzoli and Isles book. The Surgeon is the first. Her books can be a little grisly, and that can be a little disturbing, but I do like Tess Gerritsen, and I like the Rizzoli and Isles books. And again, The Surgeon is the first. I've heard of The Emperor of Ocean Park by Stephen L. Carter, but I have not read it. I actually just read Fingersmith by Sarah Waters earlier this year as part of the Queer TBR tackle, so I finally crossed it off. I thought it was a little too convoluted, but Sarah Waters is a great writer, so I don't begrudge her a place on this list. Then we have The Ice Princess by Camilla Lackberg. I have not read it. 2666, Roberto Bolaño. I remember I started this book. I still have a copy on my shelf, and I don't remember why I got interrupted. I think had worked, so I have the one that is 3 paperbacks in a box set, and I think I read the first paperback and then I stopped to read something else, and sometimes that's a really bad thing for me because if I stop, I have a tendency not to get back to it, and that definitely happened with 2666. Someday I should pick it up and I'd have to start back at the beginning, but work my way through again. But I didn't finish it. And I remember liking the first part. So it's not that I didn't like it. It's just that I took a break, and I probably shouldn't have, because I got distracted and then I never got back to it. Case Histories by Kate Atkinson. I read it because it felt like everybody was reading it in that year after it was published, and so many people loved it. And I read it and thought it was just fine. So I've kind of not read any other Kate Atkinson books, because even when one of them gets hyped, like Life After Life, I'm worried that the hype machine is going to create this sense of anticipation, and then I'm going to read it and just be like, well, okay. So let me know what you think. If I should try another Kate Atkinson, let me know in the comments down below. Don't know the devotion of Suspect X. I have read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. It's a weird book because it's very violent, but it also has very long digressions into Swedish politics and economics and things like that. And you just kind of want it to move on past those things for sure. So I got bored for stretches of the book. And it's a puzzle box mystery, essentially. And the thing I don't like about puzzle box mysteries is that in order for them to work, something that you are told has to be a lie or turn out not to be true. And that kind of happens in this book. But I really didn't like the sequel. The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, was that the sequel? Or was that, I don't remember which one is the second book. But I read it and I didn't like it, so I didn't go any further in this series. Michael Connelly's The Lincoln Lawyer. Haven't read it. I used to read a lot of Michael Connelly books, mostly in the Bosch series. Although The Poet was one of my most common recommendations when people wanted a mystery thriller when I was working at Borders. I really got tired of his books over time because really bad representation of the female characters. They're basically just treated like sex objects. And he usually has too many twists at the end, and that really gets old quickly. So I've read a bunch of his books, not The Lincoln Lawyer. The Lincoln Lawyer, I think, came out after I was already getting tired of his books. So, yeah. If you think it's worth revisiting, let me know in the comments down below. I am unfamiliar with Snakeskin Shamisen, unfamiliar with Queen Pin by Megan Abbott. I've heard of Laura Lippman, but I haven't read What the Dead Know. I was a little surprised to see The Yiddish Policeman's Union by Michael Chabon on the list, just because he is known mostly as a, literary fiction author, and I don't like that term, which is why I put it in quotes. But this is a mystery, strictly speaking. I have not read it. I've been a little hit or miss with Michael Chabon books, being honest. I love The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. I thought The Mysteries of Pittsburgh was a good book, but I didn't get along with Moonglow, was it? I think I DNF'd that book, and there's another book of his that I read that I didn't like, and I'm just completely blanking on what it was. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. I have not read it, and I would like to. I want to read Olga Tokarczuk. She is a Nobel Prize laureate, and when I do, I think this is the book that I will go with. It's just a question of, working my way to it on my pile of possibilities at this point. Don't know Wife of the Gods, or I have never read a Louise Penny book, and I really should. I have a friend who is just obsessed with Louise Penny, and I haven't done it yet, so I feel like a constant disappointment to her. Tana French, Faithful Place. I've never read a Tana French book either, but I believe she's Irish. So going back to the fact that I want to read more Irish and Scottish authors before I go to Ireland and Scotland, she is on my short list of authors to get to. I don't know that I would do Faithful Place. I'm blanking on the name of the book that most people recommend, but so I'm just going to throw it to you. What Tana French book would you recommend that I try to read first? Would A Faithful Place be a good place to start, or should I go with a different one? I am unfamiliar with The Plotters or The Sound of Things Falling. I have read Gone Girl. I actually like Gone Girl, even though I don't like what it did to the mystery and thriller genre. So it's weird that I like Gone Girl. I just don't like the effect that its success has had on the mystery and thriller genre. It feels like it keeps going to the same well again and again and again, and I don't like it. But Gone Girl was good. Gone Girl was good. I have read The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich. It is definitely the most mystery-ish of Louise Erdrich's books, although a lot of them do involve a crime. So I can see why it is on this list. But again, this is a case where it sort of blurs the line between what a lot of people would call literary fiction and what constitutes a mystery or thriller. I am a fan of Louise Erdrich. I remember liking The Roundhouse. It's not what I would say is her best, but it's a good book. So I guess I'm fine with it being on this list. I have not read 6-4. I attempted to read a different book by Hideo Yokoyama, and I didn't quite get along with it. I've not read anything by William Kent Kruger, but I've heard good things, so at some point I might look at it. I am very surprised to see Big Little Lies on this list because, I don't know. Is it here because of the TV show, or is it actually a good book? I genuinely don't know. If you've read Big Little Lies, is it that good? Let me know in the comment section down below. I have not read Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. I did want to read it when it came out, and I ended up reading her next book, Little Fires Everywhere, when it was published, but I never got back to reading Everything I Never Told You. I would like to still at some point. There are just so many things on my pile of possibility, and I don't actually own a copy, so I don't know when I would actually do that. Don't know anything about Land of Shadows by Rachel Housel Hall. The Sympathizer is a weird thing to have on this list, to me at least, because it's a Pulitzer Prize winner. And again, we're really blurring that line between mystery thriller and literary fiction. This does have an espionage element for sure. It does. But it's not really a mystery, and it's not really a thriller to me. Also, I didn't really like the book. So I'm a little confused to see it on this list. That's all. I feel like I've heard things about Attica Locke, mostly negative, maybe, but I haven't read any of their books. I don't know anything about Hollywood Homicide by Kelly Garrett. I have read My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. I really liked it. I thought it was great. And I think it was on the long-listed, possibly shortlisted for the Women's Prize, and I liked it a lot. I don't know The Widows of Malabar Hill. I've heard good things about Miracle Creek, but I have not read it. Helen Phillips and the Need. I have not read it. This is an example of something that was longlisted for the National Book Award that flirts with another genre. So in this case, mystery and thriller. Obviously, it was on the long list, but it didn't make the short list for that year. The Other Americans is another very bizarre inclusion on this list because, again, not really a mystery, not really a thriller. There is a bit of a mystery because a man gets hit by a car, and you don't really know who hits him until I think later in the story, if I remember correctly. So there's sort of a mystery at play here, but it's mostly a book about race. And, again, I feel like we're really blurring the line here. Also, again, I thought the book was just okay. It is what it is. I did read The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I think that's actually the book that made me stop reading Ruth Ware's books, to be honest. I had nothing against anybody who reads them, but I just got a little tired of her books. I've heard good things about Your House Will Pay, but I have not read it. I've heard great things about Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby. I feel like when I read an S.A. Cosby book, it's going to be Razor Blade Tears because I've heard more good things about that one. But I have heard good things about Blacktop Wasteland, and I do want to read one of his books. Hopefully soon. I do want to read Gin Patrol on the Purple Line. It was not longlisted for, I don't remember what award, sometime recently, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. I have not read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I have heard sort of mixed things, mostly skewing positive, though. So if you think this is something that I should give a try, let me know in the comment section down below. I don't know When No One Is Watching. I have read Winter Counts by David Heska Wanbley Wyden. It is a good mystery. It's set on a reservation. There are a lot of good aspects to it, but again, I kind of just thought it was okay. And once again, that seems to be a prevailing thought with me and this list. Things that are just okay, not really great. And finally, we have Survivor's Guilt by Robin. I don't know how to pronounce that last name. I have not read it, and I don't know anything about it. So there you go. That is Time Magazine's 100 Best Mystery and Thrillers. Again, some kind of weird inclusions. I'm a little offended that Sue Grafton is not on this list. I'm a fan of her books, and I'm very surprised that it's not here. I'm also a little surprised The Alienist by Caleb Carr is not on the list, even though I haven't read that book. And again, although I haven't read House of Leaves, this really feels like a place where that book should be. So another shocking omission to me. And again, somebody I haven't read, but I'm really surprised not to see on the list is Elizabeth George, just because I've heard so many good things about her. And Tony Hillerman, another author who's been on my list for a very long time, and he's not on the list. So let me know. What do you think of the list? What surprises you? What do you like? What do you not like? And who do you think should be here? Who is not? Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.